How will the war in Ukraine affect food security in Africa and the Middle East?
The war in Ukraine seems so far from the hotlands of Africa and the Middle East. But its consequences are already felt by millions of people who rely on imported food products. Before the war, Ukraine provided about 12% of global wheat exports, 15% of corn, and 50% of sunflower oil. Many countries in Africa and the Middle East are heavily dependent on these supplies. Food crisis. Most of the grain and other products needed to feed these regions are imported by sea through Ukrainian and Russian ports. But when these vital arteries are blocked, crisis is inevitable. Military actions have led to the blockade of Ukrainian ports, damage to transport infrastructure, and difficulties in growing new crops. This has significantly reduced food exports from Ukraine. Lack of food. When supplies are cut off, food prices skyrocket. Queues for basic products become commonplace, and many families find themselves on the brink of starvation. East African countries such as Egypt, Sudan, and Ethiopia are particularly dependent on imports of Ukrainian grain. Rising prices and food shortages threaten the food security of millions of people in this region. Social tension. In the Middle East, countries such as Lebanon, Yemen, and Syria, already weakened by conflicts and economic crises, face additional difficulties due to rising food prices. This may lead to social tensions and political instability. Lack of access to nutritious food becomes a threat to the health and lives of the most vulnerable segments of the population, children and the elderly. Healthcare workers struggle to save those they can, but there is so much suffering that could have been avoided. Overcoming the crisis. But Ukraine is fighting to prevent the worst consequences. Thanks to the dedication and determination of its military, it is restoring critical food supplies to Africa and the Middle East. Now that these vital sea routes are open, we can overcome the threat of famine in these vulnerable regions. The international community is making efforts to address the food crisis. This includes finding alternative sources of supply, providing humanitarian aid, and attempting to restore exports from Ukraine. By supporting Ukraine, we can protect global food security. Together, we can overcome the consequences of war. Are you satisfied with my answer to the question, how will the war in Ukraine affect food security in Africa and the Middle East? Can I be of any further assistance to you?